This may come as a shock to some of you, but I was never one of the popular kids. And boy, did that make me angry. So today, let's talk about why popularity doesn't necessarily mean something is good. Specifically directed towards popular writing advice, not the popular kids, because deep down I actually really do want them to like me. A lot of the popular writing advice you hear out there isn't actually that great, so let's explore some of that today and what you should be doing instead, beginning with adverbs. According to some people, the only things you should use an axe on are firewood, hordes of invaders, and adverbs. This might be a bit of a hot take, but I'm going to say that adverbs are a symptom of bad writing rather than the cause of bad writing. If your writing uses adverbs, cutting them out without changing anything else will actually probably weaken your writing. The reason people use adverbs in the first place is to shore up non-descriptive prose. They're used to take prose that doesn't work and try to make it better. The bridge planks moved unsteadily under his feet, or the wind blew frigidly across her face. Both of those sentences don't do a good job of describing what's going on. The writing is not evocative, so we throw in an adverb to try to make it better, to try to make it more clear to the reader what's going on in both of those situations. The adverb is a crutch to fix a weak sentence. It's not something that's ruining an otherwise good sentence most of the time. Just cutting the adverb actually makes those sentences worse because we lose the descriptive information that the adverb is trying to provide. It's still not a good sentence because adverbs are among the worst ways to describe something, but the adverb does help. It's a crutch. It's like duct tape and plastic wrap make a really bad windshield, but if your car is missing a windshield, then plastic wrap and duct tape are better than no windshield, and removing it would put you in a worse position. You have to fix the underlying problem, which is the windshield. It is far better to write prose that uses strong nouns and verbs. This will prevent the need for adverbs in the first place. He braced himself as the planks wobbled beneath his feet. Or, she tightened her scarf against the gust of winter wind. In those sentences, there's no adverbs, we're using stronger verbs and nouns to describe what's going on, and we're showing actions that the characters are taking in response to their environment, which implies the same thing that the adverbs were stating. Cutting adverbs alone is not enough. If you find yourself using adverbs in your prose, it's a sign that your prose is weak overall. You need to do more than just axe the adverbs. Next up, white room syndrome. White room syndrome occurs when you have a dialogue exchange between two or more characters that's so devoid of any other information such that the characters might as well be talking in a white room. There's no body language, no facial expressions, no action beats happening around the dialogue. The advice to avoid white room syndrome is pretty common, but it lacks a bit of nuance. When used correctly, a scene that descends into white room syndrome territory can actually be quite effective. If the dialogue exchange is emotionally heated or intense, or if you just need to really draw focus to what the characters are saying, then removing as much extraneous information around the dialogue as possible could actually be a good strategy. One of the things that happens when people enter fight or flight mode when they get particularly angry or scared is that your vision starts to narrow. Normally your peripheral vision goes out to a full 180 degrees around you, but when you get riled up, that shrinks to what is just in front of you. You get tunnel vision. So it makes sense that if a character was in a heated verbal exchange, they may notice less of what's going on around them. They may not be picking up on the body language of the person in front of them. They might not be noticing the other people in the room, effectively creating a white room situation. If you can parallel this with how the reader feels, if the dialogue exchange heats the reader up emotionally enough that they stop caring about anything beyond what the characters say, then that too can make the white room syndrome an effective technique. You will be giving the reader precisely what they want, which is more focus on what the characters are saying. Any scene like this should start off well described. You should not start in white room syndrome. and then slowly transition to a more dialogue focus as the emotion rises. And then if there's a denouement towards the end of the scene, you should return to a well-described dialogue exchange. You normally want balanced prose, which is what this advice around white room syndrome wants you to achieve, but sometimes unbalancing that prose can be an effective strategy. Next up, any advice that has to do with making a story realistic or believable. Your story should probably obey the laws of physics, unless you're in a fantasy or sci-fi setting, and then you might be able to futz with those a little bit. If you're portraying a specific real-world culture, you should probably strive to make it as accurate as possible. Characters should generally behave the way you would expect people to behave. There are a lot of things that you should portray in an accurate way in your writing. There's a big difference, though, between realism and accuracy. Readers want stories that are engaging to read, stories that capture them emotionally. When they say something isn't realistic, it usually means that this story doesn't feel like the other popular stories I've read and enjoyed, so I'm going to call it not realistic. Fiction is inherently contrived. All the situations are made up and engineered to make the plot happen. There are far too many coincidences and far too many things that just happen to play out the right way for the plot to happen for fiction to be considered anywhere near realistic. This is even true for well-plotted, plot hole-free types of stories. Fundamentally, fiction is contrived. Readers will ignore all sorts of unrealistic things in a story. This is the suspension of disbelief. Your protagonist surviving a car crash that should have put them in a coma, your detective getting a search warrant in 20 minutes, your hero being allowed to care for the infant left on their doorstep when in reality adopting a kid is like a 5-year-long bureaucratic nightmare of a process. These things can pull readers out of a story, but the number of very popular stories out there that require a high degree of suspension of disbelief in order to be realistic tells us that readers will put up with a lot. Writers walk a fine line between suspending disbelief and telling a story that's interesting enough to be engaging. Making a story more realistic, whatever the hell that means, is not a direct solution to the problem. And readers, despite what they'll tell you, don't necessarily want something that's realistic. They want a story that suspends their disbelief enough that they can get into it. Next up, the advice that once you have a first draft, you should cut, and then cut some more. There's this almost default assumption out there that everyone writes a bloated first draft, that they try to put too much into a work the first time around. This is why advice around cutting in revision is so prevalent. You'll even see a few people talk about revision as just cutting stuff out. The truth is, your story may actually need more added to it. A lot of writers don't put enough depth, enough body into their work the first time through. Some people struggle to get a novel under 500,000 words. Others struggle to reach 80,000 words. Yes, there's likely a lot that should be replaced in a first draft, stuff that needs to be changed, but cutting and replacing or changing are different things. Now, this might be partially driven by selection bias. There's so many posts online of, help, my novel is 250,000 words, what do I do? And there's a little bit of an ego component to that, I think, for some people, because it's like, look how many words I wrote. So the people who are underwriting, the people whose novels are ending up at 50,000 words probably aren't as vocal about it. Your story needs to be the right length, and where it ends up after a first draft might be too long or it might be too short. So cutting stuff out of it alone is not necessarily what you need. And if you already have a story that's not full enough, if you have a story that's lacking depth, then cutting would actually be bad for it. Speaking of what you need and stuff that is probably the right length, get your mind out of the gutter. I was talking about this video, which is both what you needed and is at the right length because we're at the end of it, so I'm going to end it here. So there you have it. I'd love to hear what popular writing advice you think is not all it's cracked up to be. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.